This time I'd like to call to order the Monday, October 6th meeting of the Currituck County Board of Commissioners. At 6 o'clock we had a work session to discuss soil types and soil engineering in the county. Before we have our invocation, I would like to recognize that Commissioner Idlett is out tonight. I believe he is ill. And Commissioner Beaumont is out due to a death. And so keep both of those in your thoughts and prayers. This time I'd like to ask us to stand for the invocation, be led by Reverend Brian Wingo from Pillmore United Methodist Church. Then he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right. Shall we pray? Gracious God, you have entrusted to us the task of leadership. We call upon your wisdom as we serve our community and the people of Currituck County. Be present in our work. Bless these leaders with your insight and compassionate vision for all people. We hold before you the needs and concerns and burdens of this community. Grant to us, Lord, the motivation, the courage, and conviction to bring your kingdom to fruition in this place. Amen.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item is approval of agenda. We need a motion for approval if there's not any corrections or additions.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is public comment. We have two people signed up tonight. First, we have Miss Mary Etheridge, and Mr. McCree will be the timekeeper tonight. And as always, we ask that you state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Mary Etheridge, and I live at 846 Shawborough Road in Shawborough. My family and I have been involved in litigation with the county since December 2011. Because of certain situations, it's been a few meetings since I last spoke. Since that time, the North Carolina Court of Appeals has also told the county what they did was wrong, but the commissioners are still taking no blame and think they have done nothing wrong and owe my family nothing. At past meetings, the chairman has called on the county attorney to give very lengthy discussions concerning our case. I would like to call on the attorney or any of the commissioners to discuss the following statements that they made as recently as their last meeting and why it did not apply to my case. Here are just a few of their own quotes from their September the 15th, 2014 meeting. Does this meet the requirements of the land use plan? If you're going to have plans and all of a sudden you don't recognize the land use plan, then you need to throw that plan down. Consistency is important. It should be compatible. Compatibility is like the bright light in my face. I agree it should be compatible. You just can't change the rules without changing them through the proper procedures. It should be approved due to its consistency with the goals, conditions, and policies. And I believe staff said it also met all of these as well. Well, folks, if they were speaking the truth, I would like to know how they approved one commissioner's own agenda and approved a junkyard in Shawborough, because it sure met none of the requirements of the county. And if you don't believe me, just ask the courts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCree, could you give some factual information to the general public again tonight?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess we have reported back to the board and to the public that the Court of Appeals did render its decision in Ms. Etheridge's appeal of the rezoning of property on Station Lane, and also the claim by the plaintiffs that they should be awarded attorney fees, as reported. the Court of Appeals found that the zoning was illegal spot zoning. The county never argued that it was not spot zoning. We argued that, of course, it was legal spot zoning in that it met the requirements under the law for a legal spot zoning. The court also importantly reviewed for the first time a new statute adopted in, I believe it was 2011 by the General Assembly that provided that in instances where a county was found to have exceeded its legal authority, a court had the discretion as to whether to award attorney fees. And further, that if the court found that a board of commissioners or city council abused its discretion, that the court must award attorney fees. The trial court in this instance found that the board of commissioners, although it may have exceeded its legal authority, it did not abuse its discretion in the decision that it made, and thus there should be no award of attorney fees. That was appealed by the plaintiffs to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals, upon review, affirmed the trial court, finding that there should be no award of attorney fees to the plaintiffs, as the Board of Commissioners did not abuse its discretion. Interestingly, in their decision, in making that determination, the Court of Appeals did indeed cite Commissioner Etheridge's lengthy motion that he made the night that this matter was before the Board of Commissioners, and in which he set forth a history of this property and its various uses over many decades, and a rationale set forth in that motion why this property should properly be rezoned to not junkyard, as the plaintiff's attorney admitted to the Court of Appeals, a recycling center is what was before the commissioners that night. But the court, while finding that that motion was certainly sufficient in order to establish that the board did not abuse its discretion, did not go quite far enough in being able to sustain or overcome a challenge relative to the spot zoning claim. With regard to the land use plan, we argued this, and it's law in North Carolina, that a land use plan is a plan. It is not a requirement. It is a guide that helps a community in making decisions with regard to planning and zoning issues. But it is a flexible living document that can be amended over the course of time as things change, as development patterns change within a community, as that community and its leadership starts making a determination that certain areas of the county needs to change the direction in which it is developing because of stated needs from persons in the community. And the Board of Commissioners, of course, during that public hearing that night, you heard some of that about the interest and desire for a place in which to dispose of recyclable material, and in this particular instance, the applicant's intention to clean up this particular piece of property and to provide for jobs and economic development within this community. So the land use plan, again, is not something that you are bound to and can never change or can never modify zoning because the land use plan might indicate otherwise, but it's important that you make sure that you establish and make certain findings to support that modification. I would note that it's a little bit different in these coastal counties because we are under the Coastal Area Management Act, and we do have to go through an additional step when we amend our land use plan to have the Coastal Resources Commission approve that amendment. But it's noteworthy that in other areas of the state, it is a regular practice where a rezoning petition is before a Board of Commissioners, for example, that at the same time the Board of Commissioners at the same meeting will indeed amend its land use plan in order to make clear that it is in conformity with the zoning map amendment that the board has decided to adopt on that particular evening. I submit that had this board maybe done that, or gone that additional step that night, that we may well have had a different outcome at the Court of Appeals. But be that as it may, the facts were established at that hearing, and that's what we had to live with. And the county, of course, is going to live with and abide by the Court of Appeals decision that the zoning must return back to its agricultural zoning designation as opposed to a conditional zoning of heavy manufacturing, and will further comply with the court's determination that no attorney fees are due. In fact, I would say that the county, even though there has been an offer of settlement from the plaintiffs, does not have the constitutional authority to pay attorney fees, particularly upon a court now having found that no monies are owed by the county to these citizen plaintiffs. Be glad to answer any questions from the board.
Want to have any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on. Next we have, thank you. Next we have James Wheeler.
Good evening. Most of you probably know me already. My name is James or Jim Wheeler. I live at 191 Beechwood Shores Drive, Moyock. The last commissioners meeting, it was discussed, a public hearing was discussed concerning a housing development proposed for the wooded area just north of the Currituck house in Moyock. I think it had 74 or 75 lots. And I think these were, if I remember correctly, about 1/4 acre lots. And I just had some concerns. One is about the number of lots being, like I said, 1/4 acre lots, 70-some lots there, and the school system in Moyock. If you have that many lots at 1/4 acre, you're going to have smaller houses. Smaller houses usually mean lower prices. Lower prices mean younger families. Younger families mean kids. Schools are already crowded. We don't need that many more kids in Moyock. And like I said, I don't think they're compatible with the housing area just north there or the one just out past the Currituck house in the same area. And if I remember right, when the septic system was proposed and put in, the septic system was supposed to be for businesses in Moyock area. And it seems like we're adding more and more houses to the septic system, which I don't know what the effect would have on that, but that wasn't what it was designed for. This area was, if I remember right, zone business, and rezoned as residential, or that was the proposal? Is that?
It's still business.
Still business, okay. But I would be against that, and like I said, mainly for the schools. Thank you all.
Thank you. That's all we have signed up. This time I'm going to close the public hearing. And next we have a special guest tonight. We have Representative Bob Steinburg, our North Carolina House of Representatives legislative update. He has come tonight and is going to address the board and Currituck County with some of the accomplishments of the last legislative session.
Thank you very much, Chairman O'Neill and Manager Scanlon, and also members of the board, and also all of those who are in attendance this evening and watching on the air. It's a delight to be here with you this evening and to share with you some of the accomplishments of the North Carolina General Assembly this year, and more so how it directly relates to the citizens of Currituck County. And so I'm going to run through a number of different items, and then I'm going to try to just briefly touch upon each one. But this was a very busy 2 years in the General Assembly, and there was a lot of things that have been changed. I think things for the better, and I think we're on the road to recovery. So let me address those right now. Initially, let's talk about budget, taxation, and the economy. The tax reform in North Carolina, this is the first tax reform that has taken place in the state of North Carolina since the Great Depression, since back in the 1930s. So obviously it was something that needed to be looked at. It was antiquated. And so we took a long look at that, and we have changed the tax rate, and the tax rate will continue to be changing as North Carolina moves toward eliminating the state income tax and reducing the corporate income tax. We have gone from a high rate of 7.75 in North Carolina income tax to a flat rate of about 5.75. And the corporate tax rate has come down about 0.75% as well. Now, what this has done, this has been a great jump start for the economy, and I want to compliment the folks here in Currituck for taking advantage of that. I don't know whether you know this or not, but Currituck County has the lowest unemployment in the state, and one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. So you all have run with this and are doing a great job. As a matter of fact, throughout the district, all of the counties in District 1, which are the counties that I represent and the State House of Representatives, all of them have experienced significant decreases in the unemployment rate. We've also want to talk a little bit about highways and interstates. The transportation is a big concern, and there are a lot of different directions we could go in talking about transportation. But one of the things I'm going to talk about as it relates to economic development is an interstate system. We do not have an interstate here. All of the companies that are shopping for places to relocate, they are looking for what they call a shielded highway, an interstate highway. Last Friday or Saturday in Edenton, Secretary of Transportation Tata was there to make a presentation on the governor's $1.2 billion transportation initiative, which is going to focus primarily on rural counties. And it was a very interesting plan to hear it unveiled. You'll hear more about that as we go forward. They're talking about a bond referendum to help finance the $1.2 billion. There are some other issues here as it relates to roads. Obviously, in Currituck, you're well aware of the problems that we have with the traffic for 16 weeks throughout the year. And this is something that very sorely needs to be addressed. I met last week with members of the Chamber of Commerce along with Manager Scanlon and Chairman O'Neill, and we talked about some of the things that we can be doing to help alleviate some of the traffic problems here. And they are numerous, and they are a bane to the business community, and they are also a thorn in the side of the citizens of Currituck who have to deal with this day in and day out. Some very good ideas came out of that session, and one of the things that we are going to do, Malcolm Fearing, the head of District 1 Transportation Division, he was there at that meeting as well, and so what we are going to do is we're going to set up a public meeting sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas. The meeting will be held in Currituck County, probably in the southern end of Currituck, and we will be inviting our neighbors from the northern end of Dare to participate in those conversations. We want to hear the input not just from business people. I think this particular event, what we're hoping to do is to get some insight from the regular people who have to deal with this every day. But really some very good suggestions came out of the meeting, and I think suggestions that will help us in the interim. We need a major fix down here, and the Mid-Currituck Bridge is something that has been discussed for probably 30 years. If the funds for the bridge were available today, it is likely that the bridge would not be built for 7 years. Look what's happening with the Bonner Bridge. I'll use that as an example. The money is there. It's sitting there, and we're waiting for the bridge to be built, but the extreme environmentalists are keeping that from happening. We anticipate some of the same resistance and pushback on the Mid-Currituck Bridge when we finally get to that point, and I believe that the bridge, as I've said all along, is going to be built, but it's a long way away. We need to do some things in the interim to keep traffic moving and to keep commerce moving here. The state pension plan has, over the years, certainly the last 7 or 8 years, has been not as strong as it could be. They have had significant success with the pension plan over the last couple of years. I believe it's increased in value about $30 billion and is much more secure. I believe the total now is about $90 billion that they have in the state pension plan. So state retirees can feel a little more comfortable about receiving their retirement checks when the time comes. Janet Cole, who's the state treasurer, just won an award recently, recognized as the best investor in the country. So she is our state treasurer. She's doing a great job with the money she has to work with, and that is certainly good news indeed. Moving on to education. The General Assembly is doing away with the Common Core standards that have been the rule of the day here for the last several years. The state is going to develop its own standards. Some of the Common Core items will be, I suspect, retained. Many of them will go. There was a great deal of dissatisfaction with Common Core among not just the folks, the citizens, but across the state, but also from teachers. A lot of teachers were not happy with Common Core. There was some inappropriate material that was being taught to our younger children, and that's just the beginning. That's the subject of a presentation all by itself. But that's gone, and we are going to revising that. Education spending. We've heard a lot about all of the cuts to education that these folks who are in Raleigh have done. Just simply, they're lies. But they're being trumpeted about. The state has spent $256 million more dollars on education this year than they did in the previous cycle, the previous 2-year cycle. One of the things that's interesting is that some of the folks, like the federal government, are saying, especially candidates, taking shots at what the Republican legislature did, when in fact the feds cut education spending to North Carolina by about $28 million. So we've increased it, the feds have decreased it. Those are the facts. I want you to think about, if you would for a moment, each and every tax dollar is being comprised of 10 dimes. Lay 10 dimes out on the counter, and if I had them right in front of me right now, these 10 dimes, I would take 6 of those dimes and I'd push them up here, and we'd set them away from the other dimes here. We'd set them up here, and this is what the state of North Carolina spends out of every tax dollar on education, 60%. 60% out of every dollar goes to education. So for anyone saying the state of North Carolina is not spending enough on education, I mean, that's just utter nonsense. We've got 4 dimes left. Let's take 2 of those dimes and let's put them up here in this corner. Those 2 dimes are used for health care, 73% of which is spent on Medicaid. So that leaves us with 2 dimes left on the table, 1, 2. These 2 dimes out of every tax dollar are the only money we have to support the rest of state government. So if you think it's tough for you folks trying to put a budget together, try to put one together for $21 billion using only 2 dimes out of every dollar. I mean, it's brutal, believe me. The teachers received, your teachers in Currituck and teachers across the state received an average 7% increase, but to be clear and to be honest, the bulk of that increase did go to teachers between 1 and 6 or 7 years of service. And the reason for that was that's where the biggest attrition rate was. We were losing teachers in droves that started out 6, 7 years ago, and they just didn't see any raises forthcoming, and they became discouraged and they left. So we need to do 40% of the teachers we were losing were coming from those teachers in the early grades, or the early years of service, rather, excuse me. So we've shored that up. Those teachers are receiving about 13 to 14% over this year and next year in pay increases. So the starting teacher pay in North Carolina will now be among the top, and I think they are the top for starting teacher pay, the top starting teacher pay in the Southeast, and we have moved from 46th to 32nd in overall teacher pay. That's just in 1 year. So I think that's pretty remarkable progress. And everybody got a raise. For those who say, well, we know a teacher that didn't get a raise or actually got less. No. If they had the same deductions that they had last year, the same people on their health care plan and so on and so forth, then they would have received an increase. If they're receiving any less money, it's because they've changed the way they're deducting the money. They've added someone onto their health insurance or something of that sort. Every teacher got a pay raise. Every state employee got a pay raise. Now think about this. We have accomplished all of this not by raising taxes, but by cutting taxes. And it's called very, very efficient government. I think you people in Currituck understand that very well. And we are following the model of many counties that are running their state or running their local governments well. We're taking a page out of their book, and we're trying to do the same thing with state government. And I believe that we're accomplishing that. In healthcare, well, let's talk about regulations just for a moment. We have also changed the regulatory environment for the state of North Carolina. The regulations, if you will, that businesses have to comply with are onerous, and many of them have been on the books for years, and they're no longer even relevant, but they're there. And I think the worst fear that anyone has who is in business is seeing a county or a state vehicle pulling into their driveway, and they think, uh-oh, we've got some problems. They're going to find something, and of course they're going to find something because there are 24,000 regulations on the books. 24,000. So what we are doing is we are paring those regulations down. Every single regulation is going to be reviewed at least once every 10 years. If it's applicable, if it's doing a good job, then maybe we need to strengthen it. Certainly keep it on the books, but if it is just not doing anything but causing heartache and heartburn for business people, then it needs to go. And we are indeed eliminating those. And the item of health care, you'll get a lot of folks who will say that North Carolina should have expanded Medicaid. Well, we're trying to run the ship in Raleigh a little different than they run the ship in Washington, the ship of state. We cannot just print up money, just like you can't print up money. We have to live within our means. And what was happening with Medicaid is we were having overruns in the previous 6 or 7 years of as much as $500 million. Now, when you think of budget planning, imagine having to, your treasurer, coming up to you and saying at the last moment, and this is what happened to us 2 years ago when we had teacher raises slated at 3%. This was in the budget, the previous budget. And somebody from the governor's office came over. We thought we had $480 million in surplus. And the governor came over and talked to us and said, that $480 million you used to have? Well, you don't have it anymore because we've got to use it to pay Medicaid, and Medicaid has to be paid. It's not free money. The federal government owes $17 trillion, which is inconceivable how they're ever going to pay it. It is fast approaching $18 trillion. And just because the feds want to run us off the cliff, those folks who are in Raleigh right now are trying to be good stewards of your money, and we're being responsible, and we're spending the money we have. We're not spending money we don't have. Let's talk about unemployment. And this is one of the last things I want to talk about, unemployment. There was a great deal of angst over the unemployment reforms that the state of North Carolina made here in the early in the last session. And think about this. Unemployment, we owed the federal government $2.7 billion in unemployment money. That's what we had borrowed so that we could continue extending unemployment benefits up to 98 weeks and beyond. $2.7 billion. Now, numbers get fuzzy, billion, a million. People say, their eyes just glaze over. But here is a fact that will hone in on just exactly what that meant. That costs North Carolina taxpayers $67 million a year in interest only, debt service only. $67 million. Nobody made any attempts in the previous regime to even pay down the principal. So what we have done is we have restructured the unemployment insurance. That $2.7 billion right now is down to under $1 billion in total debt, which will be paid off next year. So that is retiring a debt of $2.7 billion, $67 million in interest only, and I think that's a good thing. So that's going to free up more cash flow as well. The unemployment rates were reduced. We had the highest unemployment rates in the country. There were couples that were drawing as much with benefits as $55,000 to $60,000 a year, which, in my view, at least, and these folks may need it, but it's certainly not. It's not a real incentive to go out and find a new job if you're making $60,000 sitting home. Let's recap, if we can, here just for a minute, and then I'll entertain any questions. May I entertain questions? Okay, from the commissioners. Okay, we have, let me set this up here so I don't have to be looking down. I talked about the tax cuts. We have improved the tax climate in North Carolina from 6th worst to 17th best in the nation. We've abolished the death tax. A lot of folks scream that we're giving tax breaks to the rich. Well, the rich that we're giving the tax breaks to are the farmers. The farmers are the ones that were getting killed by this estate tax. It is, when a farmer wants to pass his property on to his heirs, the heirs, at his death, the heirs can't even pay the property taxes. So the farms are sold off. This is a horrible tax, this death tax, estate tax. These folks have been paying taxes all of their life. So these are the rich people that we're talking about. A lot of farmers who are very wealthy and worth millions, quite frankly. I've found in my own experience, if you go up and you want to ask them for $500 or $1,000, I mean, they got a hard time scraping it up. But land rich they are. Land rich they are. But this is the number one industry in the United States, or in the state of North Carolina, rather, excuse me. It is the number one industry in our district, in District 1. So we do want to protect our farmers. We want to ensure that the family farms are indeed passed on safely to the next generation. I talked about eliminating a mountain of needless red tape, which is choking business. I talked about improving starting teacher pay to the top in the region. I mentioned that we've raised teacher pay from 46th to 32nd in the country. I talked about the unemployment reforms. I talked about Medicaid. We have also protected the integrity of elections with voter ID, something that 73% of North Carolinians support, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, black, white, Hispanic. 73% of these folks support voter ID. And I have never heard yet any argument that's worth an ounce of salt anyone can make as to why we shouldn't have voter ID. We have ID for everything. You want to buy a six-pack of beer? You got to have an ID. You want to go to the bank and cash a check? You got to have a photo ID. You want to go to the library and take out a book? Where's your library card with your photo on it? So are the libraries, and this is the argument that is used, it's a racist thing. Well, are all of the libraries across America, are they racist? Are all the bankers across America racist? Are all the grocery stores across America, are they all racist because they want you to show a photo ID? None of them are racist, and this legislation is not racist. So that is one of our shining accomplishments, if you will, for the past session. But a lot of good news, and at this point, and there is more that I could share, but in the interest of time and these people who have come here this evening to speak, I don't want to or with respect to you, I certainly don't want to take any more time. I'm sure I've probably taken plenty of time already, but I will open for questions if anyone has any.
Want to have any questions? Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to thank you for fighting to keep the tolls off the ferries. Are we going to be able to continue that fight for the people in Knott's Island.
Yes. As a matter of fact, there was a bill, I'm trying to think of the bill now, that I sponsored in the General Assembly in the House to keep tolls off all ferries that passed 106 to 2. Only 2 people voted against it. There is wide support among Republicans and Democrats in the House of Representatives to keep the ferries toll-free, all of the ferries toll-free, not just the one at Knott's Island. So, okay.
Yes, sir.
One question. Just in the past few days, I've heard that North Carolina Department of Education has moved our grading system from a 7-point scale to a 10-point scale. And that means a 69 is failing now in the public schools. Starting with next year's incoming freshmen, a 59 would be a failing grade. In other words,
59 is a failing grade now, right? I mean, it's...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay.
It would be, but it's just going back to when you go back into the 60s or 70s, that was a grading scale that was used at that time. Your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm... Obviously, the new standards are being developed and being talked about. I don't think this is set in stone yet. I mean, this is something that will be presented by the Department of Public Instruction to the General Assembly. So we'll obviously have an opportunity to talk about that. There's some other things that are afoot that I'm not particularly fond about that's being talked about, and that's regarding American history classes and so forth, not counting for credit. Folks, if we're going to be raising up a new group of leaders in this country and in this community, these folks need to not only understand American history, but they need to receive credit for those courses. And I don't like any watering down. I'm a big proponent. We're a Dillon Rule state, which means that the state of North Carolina has their fingers in just about everything. I'm not a proponent of that, but that's the system we've had, and we've had it for a long time. I would like to see a lot of the control with education come back to the local school districts and let folks decide here what's best for their students.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm with that, having been a history teacher. I will understand, yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have one thing, and again, thank you for coming tonight and sharing with us this information. I think I want to highlight, if I can, or dovetail some of the information that you provided early on, speaking with traffic here in Currituck County, and particularly in Lower Currituck. And just to cite, and I'm going to do it for effect here, is Currituck County is ranked 33rd in travel impact, and Dare County, in the state of 100 counties. And Dare County is ranked 4. And some of the things I want to be talking about, I'm going to talk about Currituck and Dare, and you'll see why in a moment. State and local tax revenue generated from the travel industry that goes to our Outer Banks, whether that's Dare and Currituck, generates roughly $99.5 million a year in state and local tax revenue. And on the average, each travel dollar produces about 5 cents in state tax receipts. And one of the, I think the generated the economic impact that we see here between Dare and Currituck is roughly, and this is the travel tourism related, $1.990 billion. It's a lot of people coming here, and I'm using these statistics because I think virtually every one of them go by my house to get to and I say my house, I'm talking about, I live in Lower Currituck and I represent Lower Currituck, but they come through Dare County, and I'm sure there's some that'll come through 64, but I think the preponderance of the majority will come through Currituck. While there is certainly, I would say, exhibited reticence on the DOT, North Carolina DOT, to put any traffic lights in Currituck County, because we hear words that Currituck County is a quarter to get the people to the Outer Banks. As soon as you get off the Wright Memorial Bridge, in less than, I want to say, 2 miles, maybe 3, you have no less than 5 stoplights. Mm-hmm.
And that starts backing traffic up into Currituck as far maybe as Grandy sometimes. And the people in Currituck, particularly in the lower half of Currituck, are held almost, I would say, hostage. Maybe that's a little dramatic in their houses on the weekend. But even more, and that's a quality of life issue, but even more specifically, the businesses we have in lower Currituck, a lot of them have told me that they close down on the weekends. Nobody can get to them. They can't get out, nobody can get in. It's a slow rolling parking lot. That's an economic impact on our county and a significant portion of it. And one of the things that I've tasked staff to do is to present to this board a program where we can go forth and see what we can do with Lower Currituck to try to enhance or encourage economic development. But the first thing out of the blocks is you can't encourage economic development if nobody wants to open a business because they're shut down a significant portion of the week during the tourist season. So, another major impact that we're facing is safety. When you have traffic backed up and it's not moving in 2 lanes, if you have a fire, if you have an ambulance call, if you have a law enforcement response, the impact on the response time is significant. And 2, and I think I've spoken to the quality, and that's the safety, and again, the quality of life where you're virtually, I mean, for years I've noticed when, and it's gotten progressively worse, on a Friday afternoon I would get everything that I needed and I would virtually become a hermit at my house until Monday. So, and I'm encouraged to hear that you speak to this, or you spoke to it early on, and you recognize it's a significant problem. I don't know what the answer or answers are, but we have to do something because every year it's getting progressively worse. It's a safety, economic, and quality of life issue significantly for Lower Currituck, but the rest of Currituck suffers as well. So thank you for anything that you can do, anything you can do to assist us in Raleigh in getting the attention that will be necessary to help us. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome, Commissioner. And some of the things that we talked about at the meeting last week on the Tuesday with the folks, 2 of the folks from here, Mr. Scanlon, Mr. O'Neill, and the folks from the chamber were related to what can we do right now to help, just ease the burden a little bit. And, we talked about turn lanes, we talked about traffic lights, we talked about the lack of traffic lights, turning them off. We've talked about speed limits. We talked about changing check-in dates and trying to coordinate them over a longer period of time, maybe a couple of different days, check-in, check-out, so that that would help the flow of, with the flow of people coming in. More signs up to facilitate traffic flow and to give people a warning of what's coming up, so that they don't have to make a last-minute move. They can try to do whatever it is that needs to be done. It's a 16 weeks is what we're talking about approximately. And one of the things that I will share with you this evening is that the Department of Transportation, if you look at their the projects that are on the boards now for the next 25 years, are approximately $70 billion. $70 billion. Now think about that. That's today's dollars. $70 billion. Our budget is only $21 billion. So there are alternatives. We can raise the gas tax. We already have the gas tax highest in the Southeast, and we've capped that so that it can't go any higher. And that's where a lot of transportation money comes from. the transportation is funded separately. It's through that. I mean, and tolls and other things. God, I hate to mention tolls, but we're going to have to look at things. Secretary Tate had mentioned the other day in Edenton that we as a state and the local governments as well are going to have to look at things differently than we have in the past, because there are some real problems. Governments everywhere are working very sharply with reduced revenues and so on and so forth, trying to do what we can to keep the wheels of government oiled and flowing, and at the same time trying to create jobs. So there are some challenges, and I don't have I can't wave a magic wand. I don't think really, quite frankly, that the Mid-Currituck Bridge would solve all of the problems. I just don't believe that. We'd need it, and it would take some of the stress up. But there's so many other things that are needed. There's so many other things that we need to take a look at. One other advantage we have is that the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Tata, is a native of Virginia Beach. He has family all throughout the Tidewater area, and he has traversed this path down to the Outer Banks for many, many years. He knows it's absolutely outrageous. We have to do something about it. We're just one catastrophe away from really putting a dent in our $1 billion a year from these two counties that they generate in tourism dollars. We've got to protect that as well. We've got to obviously protect the citizens, but we have to protect our investment. And protecting our investment means that we're going to really have to get. There's not a lot of areas in the state that generate $1 billion in two counties. I can tell you that. I don't even know if there is another one. But we are. That's what we do here. And so a solution is needed. And that's what this meeting coming up will be all about, to try and get some additional feedback. We've got some. Just sitting around the table the other day, some great ideas surfaced, and there's no reason to believe this. Currituck County and Dare County have many, many people with many, many skills and backgrounds that will be able to, I think, really lend to this discussion and have some ideas so we can move forward. So I'm looking forward to that meeting, and I thank you for your questions. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you very much. And unless there's anything else, Mr. Chairman, I'll close my remarks for that.
Just one comment. You remember when we were talking on Thursday, I mentioned that DOT has a tendency to do traffic counts in the wintertime. Well, they've got an excellent traffic count going on right down the road here in October the 6th. So I don't think the figures we get are really going to.
Well, I'll try and help out this evening. I'll go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for the next few hours and see if I can at least help out with that. Yes, that does seem silly.
Yeah.
The traffic counts need to be made during those 16 weeks. Obviously, everybody recognizes the problem, and we're going to address it. It needs to be addressed, and we will.
Well, I just, on behalf of the board and Currituck, we thank you for coming tonight and
Thank
sharing
you,
that
sir.
information, and for being available when we need you. And you're welcome to come at any time.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank each and every one of you. God bless you, and God bless the great state of North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're welcome to stay for all the fun. But you don't have to.
No, I've got to go back and forth over the counter right now.
Okay.
Traffic counter.
Yeah, get our numbers up.
All right.
All right.
Thank you all. I apologize about having my back to you. I know you can see me on the screen. It's very uncomfortable for me to be having my back to anybody. So I didn't mean to just. There you go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Very good comment.
Have a safe trip. Next item, public hearings. Item A, public hearing and action, PB 14-15, Saddlebrook Estates, request for preliminary plat use permit for a 28-lot conservation subdivision located in Moyock on the south side of South Mills Road, directly across the street from Crown Point Estates, tax map 6, parcel 1N, Moyock Township. Mr. Woody, this was a public hearing at our last meeting. I have 4 people signed up, but I have no way of knowing if it was the same people at our last meeting. Do we need to swear them in again?
You should swear them in again, Mr. Chairman.
I have 4 people signed up. I'd ask you to come forward and be sworn in. I should place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and get going. My comments are actually going to be brief on this. The last meeting, the Board of Commissioners considered this subdivision off of South Mills Road. At that meeting, this board tabled the request for additional information, specifically regarding the use of an 8-inch water line within the subdivision. That was one comment. I think the developer's prepared to address, or the applicant's prepared to address that tonight. And the other comment was information regarding the community water system. So as you know, this subdivision and a nearby tract of land are proposed to be served by a community water system, and the board had some concerns about water quality issues. Since the last meeting, the applicant did conduct testing of the. They dug test wells to take samples of the water to determine if the quality of the water is consistent with state guidelines. The applicant and the technical review committee, specifically Pat Irwin, the utilities director, established some minerals and things to test for in the water supply system. That was done. The results of that testing were provided to the county, to the technical review committee, reviewed. There were no major contaminants that exceeded state limits in terms of water quality. Mr. Bissell is here to discuss the test results tonight. Rather than me tell you what they were, I'm going to allow Mr. Bissell to review those results. Mr. Weatherly, the county engineer, is also here if there are any technical questions, and he is aware of the testing that was done. So that's all I have to offer. Again, Mr. Bissell has more direct information on the items or the reasons why this was tabled at the last meeting.
Well, with that, I'll open the public hearing and let Mr. Bissell come and address what the requests were from the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Woody, as Mr. Woody said, we did get together with the Public Utilities Director, and Mr. Irwin came up with a list of parameters that he thought were appropriate to have tested at this stage of the game. And those were iron, manganese, hardness, chloride, pH or acidity, nitrate, and nitrite, nitrogen. And those tests were done. We pumped the wells and obtained samples and sent them to a state-certified laboratory, and the results were good. There was one parameter, which was manganese, that was slightly high on one of the wells. The other well was low, and when we combined the water from the 2 wells, we're fine. The other parameter, the water is a little bit hard. It's at this stage premature to know whether or not we will need to provide a softener. That will be determined during the final design process. I did also provide to the county a summary of the water system approval process that we go through with the state. This actually is a flow chart, and these attached pages give you more information about it. But the process generally goes that you identify the water source, then you request a site evaluation for your proposed well sites by the state. And if the sites are approved, you then move on to the test well stage. And once you've drilled the test wells, you do enough sampling to be able to do preliminary design of your system. And that's the point where we are right now. Once that is approved, you then follow 2 parallel courses. You prepare and submit a water system management plan with an engineer's report, and that is done 60 days before you want any kind of an approval. And that includes how are you going to operate the system, what is the required funding level for that system to make sure that you have adequate operation and maintenance, and know how much money to set aside in reserves in order to be able to repair and replace anything that needs to be replaced in the future. So that is all part of the parallel course with the plans and specifications. The next step is actually to drill the permanent production wells, and at that point we do significantly more testing. So in addition to the inorganics, there's actually a complete set of inorganics. There's a bacteriological analysis. There's a complete radiological testing for radionuclides. We do volatile organic compounds, synthetic organic compounds, and trihalomethane formation potential. So compared to a residential well, the requirements are quite strenuous. The state reviews all that along with the plans, and that's the point where the final treatment is determined, and the state reviews that and makes sure that it's in accordance with all of their regulations. This is their rule book on that governs this particular kind of a system. So I assure you that the approval process is everything that it needs to be. So, but based on the results that of everything we've tested so far, which was what the utilities director recommended, I think we're in good shape. The other thing we were asked to do was to consider the upgrading to an 8-inch water line, and we have agreed to do that.
All right, y'all have any questions for Mr. Bissell?
Mr. Bissell, you said that 60 days out from the project or approvals, the more intensive testing would be done on the organics and the synthetics and things like that. So that's 60 days from that approval.
Actually, that process will start immediately with the drilling of the production wells.
Okay.
The 60-day process was the financial plan.
All right, and you also spoke about reserve funds that would be set aside. In the case that the system failed, how do you equate or how do you set sufficient funds aside to connect to the county water or resolve the issues? Is that on the homeowners association? How is that funded, or how is that put in reserves? I need to understand.
Well, I guess it depends on what the failure is. If it's that let's say the iron level increases, that could be considered a failure. And what happens is at that point you would need to install a filter in order to get the iron level back down to the level that, and right now we don't, because our iron is only 0.18 and you're allowed 0.3 milligrams per liter. But if it were, then it would just be a user cost. It would increase the cost of the operation of the system. Additionally, we will be establishing a water district, so the county will actually have a tax district available. If in the event that there were, say, a catastrophic failure, there would be a taxing authority to do what needs to be done.
Okay, so that's something that you're going to set in place with the covenants through the homeowners association?
That's actually something that's required by your ordinance. So,
I just want to clarify.
We'll have to come back and make sure that that's done.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Bissell. After the public speech, you may be asked to answer some more.
Okay, thank you.
Next on the list, we have Vernon Garrett from Moyock. And again, I ask you to state your name and address, and Mr. McCree is going to be the timekeeper.
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vernon Garrett, South Mills Road, Moyock. I would like to propose questions for discussion: ownership of the common space and how it will be maintained. Target prices of the homes, whether they be built on slabs or piers, 2-story, single-story. I would like it added in the bylaws that on the south side of that property, there are two very active farms. And there are certain things that go along with farms, dust and such a thing, and aerial application possibly that alarm homeowners. Timber on the south that may someday be harvested. That also becomes a big alarm to subdivisions. And I would like to save the balance of my time until...
I think Mr. Woody can address your buffer questions.
The UDO requires a buffer area, and it's shown on this plan. It's difficult to see, but there's a vegetated buffer area between a new subdivision and active agricultural area. So there will be a 50-foot setback, and there'll be some vegetation planted. In terms of timbering, were you referencing timbering an adjoining wooded tract, basically?
Within the proximity of that property, yes. The Cutchins family has timber that may someday be harvested, and that always alarms
It does, and
subdivisions.
There's nothing that would prevent that land from being timbered. I mean, honestly, it can alarm subdivisions. I don't have a good answer for that other than to say it's just an allowable use of land. I will note in terms of agricultural activities too, and this subdivision is recorded in addition to the buffering, there's a note required to be placed on the plat that says, I think purchasers of this subdivision may experience dust, fumes, noise, odor from adjoining agricultural activities.
Thank you.
So there is a note placed on the plat.
Okay.
And then one other question that Mr. Garrett had was the common area, the open space, is owned by the homeowners association, and they are responsible for maintenance of that.
They make the decisions as to how it will be managed.
They will.
Okay.
Yes. Now the ordinance has some standards on how it is managed, but generally within that framework, they are responsible for management and decisions of how it's managed.
Very good. And one other question, the types and target prices of the homes, I've never heard that mentioned. Slab, two-story, single-story.
I'd have to defer to the applicant to answer that question.
Okay. Commissioners, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I will make one comment. One of the things that we have discussed several times is encouraging the open space to either be farmed for timber or to be farmed for crops, but to try to keep it off of the homeowners association having to go hire somebody to mow grass all the time, like several of our subdivisions do. We are trying to encourage going forward to leave it in timber or plant timber, a low maintenance type of open area, so that it doesn't hike up the homeowners due so bad. Like in some subdivisions, it's pretty steep.
Very good.
All right, next we have Jeff Hansen.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Jeffrey Hansen. I'm a resident of 126 Regency Circle in Moyock at Crown Point subdivision. I'm also the HOA president. Clear up a couple things made at last meeting that I wasn't able to attend by Mr. Bissell of agreements between myself, the executive board of HOA. I'd spoke at the city council meeting about the interest of the HOA in our deed of an easement along the ditch line running on the south side from South Mills behind Saddlebrook. We have a deeded right to 2,700 feet of that ditch for drainage of our subdivision. Talking with Mr. Bissell, he and I have came to an agreement with his client to they're going to contribute the next cleaning to pay a third of the cost, not to exceed $1,000. They are also agreed to not to plant, make sure that there's no planting or trees or shrubberies put on that easement down that ditch line so that we have access to it. And there's also going to be a clause in the subdivision covenants to make sure we have access through their subdivisions to access that easement for future cleaning of that ditch line. So there was questions on whether that he and I actually had that conversation, so I did want to clear that up, that he and I did come to that agreement, and they have generously agreed to help clean us at the next time when the soybeans are gone at this time. Now, that is speaking in the capacity of the HOA president. I feel I don't want to speak for the other homeowners because they haven't contacted me and their concerns or questions. Speaking as a resident, I do have a couple concerns. I mean, we've already talked about the small area plan, and I agree with what the gentleman said earlier about it being a living, breathing document, but it is our guiding principles. And there are some concerns that I have as a resident of that, and two purposes that plan was put together is the preservation of a rural atmosphere in Moyock and Currituck, and also improved stormwater management and drainage. Now, that does bring concerns because we do have significant draining problems from the Crown Point estates. I mean, it's significant. I have a lot of homeowners that do get flooding. So it is our concern, and we like the rural area that we have. Now, there's two things that I want you to ask the board to consider in your interest of this subdivision being put in place. On page 29 of that plan, it says the lot sizes at the fringe of the new development should be similar to the existing development. So the fringe of the new development will be against Crown Point. Our subdivision consists of 49 plots. Two of those, one is just over 2 acres, one at just 2.5 acres. The other 47 are at 3 acres. So those being 1/2 acres, that's not very similar to the fringe of the existing subdivision. The other one is right now, rural area is 1 unit per acre. This obviously is far from 1 unit per acre. So again, it is guiding principles. It's not rock solid, but I just ask that you consider these things because this plan was put into place as the guiding principles for us to develop Currituck. So I'm not against the subdivision and the development of the subdivision personally. I just ask that we go by our guiding principles before you vote on it and make sure that we're meeting those. That's all I ask. So,
Yes, sir.
thank you for your time.
Mr. Woody, what is the density per acre?
Density is 0.49 units per acre, so it's less than 1/2 a unit per acre. Gross density, and the lot sizes are the minimum lot size is 28,500 square feet, so about a little over 1/2 an acre. And I will note, if you look on the aerial photograph on the screen, the gentleman's correct. Crown Point does have larger lots, but you can see the subdivisions that adjoin Crown Point on either side have a similar 1/2 acre type lot size, so there is a context of this lot size in the area, and the overall density is consistent with the rural designation of the land use plan.
How many acres is this total tract?
This tract is a total of 56 acres, 56.73 acres, and it has 28 units, 28 lots.
So the rural calls for 1 unit per acre, so that if they followed that, it would possibly be 50-some units?
Now, the rural is actually is basically 1 unit, or excuse me, 0.4 units per acre. So that's, a little over it's a gross density of a little less than 1 unit per 3 acres. Now, if this were limited service where you have a 1-for-1 density, then you could potentially have 56 units on this.
So this is in keeping with the rural?
It is in keeping with the rural, yes.
Okay. Designation. Okay. Anyone have any further questions, Mr. Woody? Next, we have Ms. Denise Kennedy.
I brought pretty pictures, and I'm a visual person. That's the land plan, the small area plan, and the subdivision, and that aerial photo. I'm Denise Kennedy, 892 South Mills Road. Mr. Chairman and the board, I thank you for allowing me to come here and speak tonight. I also am not opposed to development of land, but I would ask that the commission use the UDO, the small area plan, and the amended land use plan in their decision making. The small area plan, which was adopted less than 6 months ago, specifically identifies rural as a sparsely developed area where land is primarily used for farming, forestry, water, dependent uses, very low density residential uses, and open space. Residential densities in this designation are low. Access to public water fire protection is limited but available. They do not have public water in this subdivision. The UDO, both the land use and the small area plans identify this land as rural, and the UDO identifies it as agricultural. The land use plan identifies 1 home per 3 acres, and the small area plan 1 home per acre. And those are on pages 9 tax 7 for reference. Duck Ridge and Quail Point, the 2 other subdivisions that are located near there besides Crown Point, were both built in the 1990s and were not subject to any of these plans. And I could not find what they were subject to at that time. So you're comparing something that wasn't being subjected to the same standards as the plans that are currently in place. On page 3 tac 8 of the UDO, the agricultural district accommodates small-scale residential uses and allows farmers to capture a portion of land's development potential through special provisions for conservation subdivisions, which this is being applied for as, that allow a portion of a tract or site to be developed with single-family homes while the balance of the site is left open to lands available for continued agricultural use. That's not going to be able to happen in this particular subdivision because on the southern portion of this subdivision is wetlands. I very much doubt they can farm there. And the top corner, the other portion that's being left open, while it could be timber, there's not a lot of space in that top corner that's not being utilized. There's some items that I would hope that if the board goes ahead and improves the land use that they would consider doing. On the street line on South Mills Road in their landscape plan, there is nothing identified for trees or anything else. And the UDO requires a 10-foot minimum barrier of trees and bushes from anything that is 1,000 feet from any street line. And that's on page 6, Tech 28. The developer keeps discussing a 24-hour test of the proposed well. I would like to find out if it would be possible for during that 24-hour full blast test or whatever it is that any residents within the area be notified so that they can take a look at their water quality during that testing as well as any additional stress that's put onto their wells during the time frame of the testing to find out what kind of impact that would have. They never did a community meeting, which is part of the small area plan, is to find out, talk to other people within the community that have a vested interest in, I would say Crown Point honestly does, and because the potential impact on our home prices. And finally, while yes, there was agreements made with the HOA for the ditch in the fall, they will be draining stormwater into that ditch. I know that they've got the 2 fire ponds. I know that they're going to be collecting water from the subdivision into there, but they've already said repeatedly only they would be collecting 75% of the runoff. 25% will still be going into the ditches, and in those times when Crown Point Estates has the biggest issues with flooding is when we have significant rainfall. At that same time, those ponds have an overflow valve that's going to be going into that same ditch. So there's, in the worst times for Crown Point, there is no saving grace by the fire ponds that are being put in by the developer. Thank you, and I'm sorry I went over.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes, sir?
You asked a lot of things there, and I'm going to try to get you some answers, so can you just stay there a second?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Woody, she brought up about the buffer along the highway for the UDO. Is that something that will be addressed at?
I don't believe it is. I don't have the UDO page in front of me, but I believe that buffer is subdivisions within 1,000 feet of a major arterial, which this South Mills Road is not. So certainly, if this were on Currituck Highway or 168, 158, it would be subject to that screening requirement. But I believe that applies to major arterials, if I remember correctly. Now, the board can certainly make that a condition of the approval.
Okay. The other question.
Community meetings are required for subdivisions of 50 or more lots. So this subdivision was not required to have a community meeting.
Okay, that answers why that didn't happen.
Thank you.
The density.
Small area plan.
Moyock Small Area Plan said densities of less than 1 unit per acre, which this is the density of less than 1 unit per acre. It is a density of 0.49 units per acre. Again, as we discussed in our work session, it goes back to, and we maybe should do this at a public meeting, density is not the same thing as lot size. And so, the lot sizes are just over half an acre, but the overall density of the tract is 0.49 units per acre.
Okay.
So the densities are consistent with the adopted plans.
Ms. Kennedy, I know I'm leaving something out.
The testing of their well, when they're doing their full bore, I forget what Mr. Bissell called it. I don't know. I'm not you. But they were supposed to be doing a full blast test of the well.
Would there be any objection to letting the neighboring subdivision know when that happens?
We have no objection.
We can also make that part of anything going forward.
It's stormwater, I believe.
Yes.
And I would probably need Mark Bissell to comment on this, but I do believe that ditch that runs on the southern property line is their ultimate outlet ditch. So the stormwater ponds that are designed will hold a lot of water. I mean, they're designed to hold basically over a 6-inch rain event, which is modeled on a wooded state, which means it's actually basically, in theory, in engineering practice, the land as agricultural land will run more water off than it will once it's developed because they're adding these retaining ponds. Now, is there a point at which it just rains so much that those ponds are going to overflow? Probably. I mean, that's a fair statement. I'm not going to say it's not going to, but certainly in terms of managing basic rain, this in engineering practice should hold more water on the site after the development than it does before.
But when the bottom line is, or one of the things that I had said was, their ponds, when they're overflowing, are still going to be going into the same ditches. And there was no agreement with the Crown Point deeded HOA for any kind of future maintenance past this fall. There was an agreement made for the fall that the executive board notified us of. But they're not, so Crown Point has to pay to maintain what they're also using. And then also we're paying for access to the Guinea watershed. And
They'll have to-
we have to pay tax on that for our homes.
And
if
these
they're-
owners will also. And they'll have a maintenance responsibility for the ditch as well.
Can that be included as part of the
Part
board's-
of our,
It can, yes.
yes, and I believe part of the stormwater management plan requires the monitoring by the county of ongoing maintenance of drainage ditches, if I'm not.
It does. There are maintenance requirements. Now, this subdivision is going to flow into that ditch, so this subdivision certainly will have a maintenance requirement. I know that Crown Point obviously has some need of that too, so
a shared responsibility.
the shared responsibility. But this subdivision does not. It won't be a situation where this new subdivision does not have any responsibility, because they do, and they'll have to show that in their covenants and their fee structure. So they don't get to use the ditch at Crown Point's maintenance expense. That's got to be calculated and figured.
And agreed, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And my only other point that, I'm sorry, wasn't
Go ahead.
addressed was, in the UDO, a farmer can subdivide for residential in an agricultural. Quality Homes and Saddlebrook LLC is not a farmer. None of this lot is being set aside for continued agricultural uses. Every square inch that is currently being farmed on there, other than what's being set aside for their required by law easements, their required setbacks, the 50 feet between other farms, none of that, and the ponds, and a 2-acre plot for reserved use. And I think that's because in case septic system fails, they have to have it available. Everything else is houses. There's no reserved agricultural use, and they're not farmers. This is a development, not a farming subdivide from the UDO.
I'm not sure that Mr. McCree or Mr. Woody, I'm not sure that only farmers can subdivide property in an agricultural district. Is
They
that?
said under the conservation section of is the way it was worded in the UDO.
The conservation subdivision is certainly a tool for farmers, and you're going to see a subdivision on your next case where a farmer, in fact, did have a portion of the land subdivided and developed and continued to actually farm the open space. So it certainly is a tool, but it's not a mandatory tool in the way our ordinance is applied. And by example, there are certainly other subdivisions in this part of the county, including the ones across the street, that have been developed for uses, and parts of those aren't farmed. We've had the conservation subdivision for a very long time in this county. So I don't think it's, I agree with you in the fact that that is the intent, and it is intended to be a tool for the agricultural community, but I don't think the county has historically, nor does it have the authority to say you have to farm your open space, because our ordinance has included provisions to allow other uses of open space beyond farming.
I'm just saying it was zoned agricultural, and the UDO specifically said the conservation and agricultural and farmers. I can give you the page number.
I understand.
Mr. McCree can comment on the
Well,
legality
no,
of.
I think it's what, as Mr. Woody described it, I mean, it is an intent or a goal that the county seeks to achieve, but there is no restriction within the ordinance that allows only for a farmer in this instance to subdivide property.
Okay. Anything else?
Nothing. No,
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Sorry.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Bissell or Mr. Woody? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask the board for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to approve PB 14-15 with staff findings and recommendations included in the case analysis and the following additional findings and conclusions. The use will not endanger the public health or safety because the subdivision should have little to no negative impact on public health or safety. The use will not injure the value of adjoining or abutting lands and will be in harmony with the area in which it is located because of the minimum lot size for the proposed development, and I love it, 28,500, and is consistent with residential densities in the surrounding area. The use will be in conformity with the land use plan or other officially adopted plan because it is a conservation subdivision located in a rural area and protects environmentally sensitive features. The use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities. And I wanted to add also the buffer must be on South Mills Road. We had talked about that. And the well test notification to the people in the surrounding area so they can see the impact of the test might have on their people. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to...
Drainage ditch?
I'm sorry?
Agreement.
The agreement with the stormwater district for drainage.
Oh, and I thought that was already in place.
Okay.
Continue that.
Okay, well, huh?
8-inch water line.
Yeah, and the 8-inch line.
Oh, yeah, the 8-inch line. I think he had addressed that already. And the 8-inch water line and the stormwater district, I guess, to be continued, I guess. Is that what you're referring to?
I think that we had talked about ditch maintenance, the responsibility for ditch maintenance being outlined in any covenants or any documents approved as part of this new subdivision.
Right.
Okay, but I thought you said that was already in place, so we have to add this in my motion?
You could certainly add it as a condition to strengthen your motion.
Okay, so the covenants have to have in place ditch maintenance for stormwater.
Outline ditch maintenance responsibility.
Outline ditch maintenance responsibility in the covenants.
Between this new subdivision and Crown Point.
Between this subdivision and Crown Point. That's my motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item B is public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say this. I'd like to compliment the developer for doing the water test. That was my main concern. Commissioner Ollett was about the 8-inch. So you guys did a good job as far as I'm concerned. And I love the 28,000 square foot lots. That's over and above what I thought. Thank you.
Public hearing and action, PB 04-48, Indian Ridge Estates. Phase 2, request for a preliminary plat amended use permit for 5 additional lots in an existing conservation subdivision located in Shawboro on the south side of Shawboro Road, tax map 34, parcel 24J, Crawford Township. Is there, the only person I have signed to speak is Mr. Hyman. Is there anyone else? Hearing none, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth, so help you God?
I do.
Mr. Woody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is phase 2 of an existing subdivision here in Currituck County, off of Shawboro Road. And essentially what happened is in 2004, the Board of Commissioners approved a sketch plan for the Indian Ridge Estates subdivision. What this was a conservation subdivision, and it basically placed as a total of 250 acres, and the vast majority of that acreage remained in open space and continues to be under agricultural uses. The property is on agricultural on the zoning map. It's designated as rural in the land use plan, and what you have tonight is a request for the last 5 lots in this subdivision. I wasn't here with the staff when the original subdivision was approved, but my understanding is that at the time there were some soil conditions that prevented these 5 lots from moving forward for final plat approval with Phase 1. So they've kind of been remaining lots. Mr. Hyman may be able to explain the hydrology of all this to you better than I can. But in summary, they've now been able to come back, and it's probably due to some changes in hydrology with the stormwater and ditching that's been installed. I think the state requirements for on-site wastewater systems changed in probably 07 or 08. And then I think they also have increased the size of these 5 lots to make them able to have on-site septic systems in repair areas, and they've been approved by the health department. So we're here tonight before you presenting the last 5 lots, or Phase 2 of this subdivision, for your approval. The TRC did review this request and did find that it meets the requirements of the UDO and the findings of our use permit, and recommended approval. The planning board also reviewed this request, and they too recommended approval. And I can answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Woody? Mr. Hyman?
My name's Eddie Hyman with Hyman and Rubin. I'm here to represent the project. Initially, the sketch plan that Mr. Woody was talking about contained 6 lots in this area, and they were turned down due to hydrology, as Ben talked about. Some of the regulations have changed, and we also, from the guidance from the health department, they asked us to drop a lot and recombine them. The original lots were around 25,000 square feet, where the rest of the ag land was set aside as a farming easement. But we've recombined them to now they're 30 to 31,000 square feet, or 0.8 of an acre. So we've dropped a lot to at the health department's suggestion, and we reduced the lots from 6 to 5, and now we've got their approval. So I'll be available for any other questions you may have, but that's the gist of what's gone on over the years since they were initially turned down as 6 lots.
Anyone have any questions, Mr. Hyman?
Yes. I remember when this came forward, and there was a lot of discussion about the flooding and the soil compositions there. And we just had a workshop on soils and everything. And are these lots going to have to be soil sampled and inspected as far as the type of foundations that's going to have to be installed, et cetera, because of water and or unsuitable soils there?
Are you talking about the building foundations,
right,
or the septic system?
Well, actually, all of it, because it is combined there because of the, I think, the flooding there and the soil composition, isn't it?
Well, these lots are still on the ridge part of Indian
Yeah.
Ridge, but the soil structure was deeper than they wanted at the time when they were originally evaluated. They're allowing mound type systems now. They're allowing sand backfill trenches that were not. There were experimental systems at the time these lots came through. These lots are well drained and still up on what we call the Indian Ridge segment there. They did drop off some, but to put a conventional system on the smaller lots, there wasn't enough room. With the increase in lot size, there's now room for a 100% system and a 100% repair area in case of a failure, as well as the sand backfill trenches and a shallow placement mound system. Now, to ask you a question about the foundations, the foundations, I think there's a new ruling in the county where they have to have a geotech report on some of the foundations in an area, and if the first two or three they sample pass, then they don't require the geotech report for the foundations. And that's a new ruling. I think the building department building permit section is going through. I've heard information on that. The soil structure, as far as the septic goes, I don't think it was any problems with soil structure for a footing. But they will be inspected in their footer inspection before they pour the concrete and tested like they normally do.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask the board for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go 2 for 2 here. I'd like to make a motion to approve PB 04-48 with the staff findings and recommendations included in the case analysis and the following additional findings and conclusions. The use will not endanger the public health or safety because the subdivision will adhere to county health and safety standards. It will not endanger the public health or safety. The use will not injure the value of adjoining or abutting lands and will be in harmony with the area in which it is located because the minimum lot size for the proposed development is 30,501 feet. Thank you. Square feet and is consistent with residential densities in the surrounding area. The use will be in conformity with the land use plan or other officially adopted plan because it is a conservation subdivision located in a rural area and allows continued agriculture uses. The use will not exceed the county's ability to provide adequate public facilities. That's my motion.
Have a motion for
Second.
approval. Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, public hearing and action, PB 1420, shingle landing townhomes. Request a conditional rezoning of 4.03 acres from general business to conditional district mixed residential on property located in Moyock on the north side of Moyock Landing Drive, tax map 9, parcel 029T, Moyock Township. Mr. Wooding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a conditional zoning request from the general business district to MXR. MXR is a district in Currituck County that allows a mix of uses. The applicant can do single-family dwellings, they can do attached or multifamily dwellings, and it even allows some minor or small commercial. In this particular request, as a conditional zoning, they have specified what it is they're going to do, so you will know what use they have chose to move forward with in this rezoning request. You can see on the aerial photograph, this property is an undeveloped tract at the entrance to the Shingle Landing subdivision, just east of Currituck Highway. Zoning pattern, you have general business, which basically phase 2 of Shingle Landing is zoned general business, and our GB district in Currituck County clearly allows commercial, as you see the assisted living facility there, but it also allows single-family development. And the reason the GB district allows single-family development is because there's so much GB in the county that has single-family, the county didn't want to make it all become non-conforming. So it's not typical you see 1 acre lots or half-acre lots or whatever in GB zoning, but it is an allowable use in Currituck County. However, multifamily is not allowed in GB, and that's why you see the rezoning request before you tonight. And on the aerial photograph, I do want to point out, just to bring your attention to this, to the north of this tract is a piece of land off in Venters Drive. That is a rezoning request you saw a couple of weeks ago for 76 single-family dwellings. To the east of this, you see the assisted living facility. To the south, across Moyock Landing Drive, is additional open space for the Shingle Landing subdivision. And then to the west of this, you have the railroad tracks, then commercially zoned parcels that front on Currituck Highway. So in the immediate adjacencies to this parcel, you don't really have a lot of developed land or anything that has existing single-family dwellings, although they are nearby. Land use plan designates this area as full service. That's the county land use plan and the Moyock small area plan. Real quickly, full service is intended for residential development densities that are medium to high, depending on available services. Typically where you have on-site wastewater or limited county services, in those full service areas you see densities of 1 to 2 units per acre. In our land use plan, areas that have central sewer and water and additional services, close proximity to EMS services, to law enforcement, et cetera, those areas are able to achieve densities of 3 to 4 units per acre, provided the character of the surrounding area supports it. So, again, talking about density, I just want to be up front that the county's adopted plans show this area as full service, which does allow for densities of 3 to 4 units per acre. And this particular request tonight is proposing a density of 4 units per acre. here on the screen, you can see the site plan for the property. It is on the orientation is different. So actually, this is the street on this particular site plan is to the north. Moyock Landing Drive is, and so you're kind of upside down for how you normally look at a map, and then the railroad tracks are on the right side of the map. But again, you see what you see is the footprint of 16 buildings laid out on this tract of land. It's 4 acres. There is county water available to the site. The developer is requesting connection to the Moyock Central Sewer System. The particular development is served by Moyock Landing Drive, which is the same road that the residents of Shingle Landing and the assisted living facility use for their access. Obviously, this, and I'll get into this in a second, but clearly this development would use that road and would need to contribute towards any maintenance costs associated with that road until such time as DOT accepts that road. County wetland inventory doesn't indicate wetland characteristics. As a conditional zoning request, what they have to develop is what they've provided to you in this plan format. So you can see they are essentially proposing 16 units on a circular type drive. Part of the conditional zoning request is that they show you, the Board of Commissioners, a conceptual plan, and then they're bound to develop under that conceptual plan. They propose, again, they have zoning conditions. They're allowed to put conditions, and their condition is that their density will not exceed 4 units per acre, and that existing wooded areas will be retained except for stormwater drainage is required. So if there are wooded areas on the tract, and there really isn't, to be honest, perhaps along the ditch line there's some wooded area, but basically that's the conditions they've requested. They held a community meeting. Community meetings are required for conditional zoning requests. There's a summary of that meeting in your agenda package. There was attendance at that meeting by property owners, and there was some concern by the property owners or by the adjoining owners that the development may, in fact, lower the value of adjoining homes or nearby homes. The TRC has also reviewed this. Actually, before I do that, excuse me. You've got this conceptual plan that you're considering tonight. They've also, the conditional zoning requires that they submit elevations so you can see the form or the type of building or structure that is being proposed. In this particular case, they have submitted photographs. Typically for conditional zonings, we do see building elevations. In this case, they're incorporating photographs, so I just wanted to show you a couple. I believe these are quadplexes, and obviously not in Currituck County, but what they're trying to propose is that the multifamily will occur in a similar type structure as this, on this particular site plan. And I want to come back to that in a second. The Technical Review Committee has reviewed this request, and the TRC does recommend approval as the request is consistent with the goals and objectives and densities of the land use plan, and that it is the appropriate zoning district and land use. And what I mean by that is, in terms of just surroundings, if you're going to have multifamily, to be between the highway and assisted living facility isn't necessarily a bad place for that land use to exist, or if you're going to have that density, for that density to exist. The TRC does have some concerns about really more about the site plan and the elevations that were submitted. One is, I think it's unclear based on our review if these photographs in fact would be the buildings that would be built on these building footprints. I'm not sure I'm not sure the footprints on the site plan match the elevations you've seen that have been proposed. I think one thing that's important for the board to consider is that if they do build the multifamily project here, that the units maintain a residential character, because this is the entrance to a residential subdivision. So I think it's important that this multifamily does have the appearance of housing stock or has a residential appearance. I would note that, in fact, if this does move forward and the developer proposes to build some structure different than this or to modify the site plan, they would have to come back to the board for an additional approval, because, again, these site plans and elevations, in this case photographs, are binding on the approval. Additional thing that staff would point out in terms of residential character is it may be appropriate to make sure that some of the buildings along Moyock Landing Drive have a frontage on that drive. Again, that's not an ordinance requirement, but in terms of if you drive into the community, I'm not sure you'd want to see the back of multifamily buildings facing the road. It may be advantageous to make sure that these proposed units have some sort of presence to the residential street that they access from. Maybe even double fronted units, or the back looks like the front, et cetera, to kind of maintain the residential character you have on that street. Staff would also recommend or would suggest the board consider that if the development if the streets continue to be maintained privately, that this development would contribute or participate in the maintenance of those streets and the railroad crossings, so that needs to be clear. Obviously, if NCDOT assumes maintenance of the road, that's not really an issue, but I think as long as these roads are private, this development should participate in the maintenance. And I have no reason to think the developer would have an issue with that. And then finally, again, I would just tell the board that as a conditional zoning request, you do have the ability to ask for the developer to accept conditions on this to try to address issues of compatibility or concern or consistency with the land use plan. Any conditions or anything you ask the developer to do as part of conditional zoning, they must agree to. So in a use permit, you can just kind of add conditions. In a conditional zoning, it has to be something agreed to between the board and the developer. Now, of course, if there's lack of agreement, the board has the option of either turning down the request or approving it anyways. The planning board also heard this request at their meeting. They did recommend approval with one condition. The planning board's condition was that the units share exterior architectural design elements with the shingle landing subdivision. And I think the planning board's purpose in that condition was to ensure some compatibility between these proposed multifamily units and the single family that exists. And that concludes my presentation, and I can answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Woody?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Woody, was there any indication these would be sold? If so, at what price?
There's not been to this point. The request is just for multifamily, so these could be townhomes, they could be condominiums, or they can, in fact, could just be multifamily apartments. So I'm not aware of what that ultimate disposition is for these units.
So they could be rental units?
It could be, yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Woody. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
May or may not be the appropriate time, but I ask, and I think the record will reflect my concerns for lot size and density combined in Moyock. I asked Mr. Woody for some information. In 2013 and 2014, in the pipeline and already approved, 540 homes, including these. 540. In 2014, of the 540, 400 of those have just been approved. The example I gave Mr. Woody today, this is like an ink spot on an ink blotter. It's just going just like this. And I said it 2 weeks ago, and I'll say it today. I've got these numbers here for anybody else who'd like to see them. 540. This is Green Run coming right down the pike. And I said it earlier. My number is 20,000 square feet. And now, if they can prove me wrong, then that's fine. But this may or may not be the appropriate time, but I've got the numbers here from Mr. Woody, and I think you'll attest that these are accurate. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question/observation. And looking at the picture you have up there, it's hard to see the detail up there, but looking at our packet here, the open space in the center, which is represented by the innermost circle, which appears to be surrounded by a 24-foot driveway. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And looking at this, what I see depicted in that active open space is a swing set, balance beam, and a merry-go-round. Has there been any discussion? Is this development targeted at like young families, starter type development? And the reason I ask that because what's represented here in the plat is indicative of that with the merry-go-round, the swing set.
Yes, during the technical review committee, staff did discuss with the engineer questions along the line of what is this development targeted for? Do the open space amenities, are they consistent with who they're targeting for the units? We kind of asked the developer to think about that and make sure that those were in sync, and there was not any changes made to the recreation features following the TRC meeting. So I would have to assume that based on the amenity package, yes, it's probably targeted for families for young families.
And just an observation, I'm not a planner or designer, but it looks like access to this is through the circle.
That's correct.
Which kind of sort of looks problematic for young children going to it because it doesn't look regulated. And just looking at this, and I guess I'll ask for a comment, it kind of looks like this was put in as maybe an afterthought, or maybe this wasn't the primary function considering this active open space. Is that assessment correct? It looks like it's right in the center, and it looks like it's dedicated for younger children, but it looks like it's also an active highway that is a circle, and we all know that any kind of traffic circles are kind of sort of problematic for people getting in and driving around them and whatever. I mean, I'm just...
Yeah, and that may be, obviously a question that the designer can answer directly, but in terms of... I don't disagree. I mean, you could argue that having the amenity area and having to cross a drive aisle to get to it may not be ideal for young children, so I would argue that perhaps that could be... Those amenities maybe could be better integrated onto other parts of the site. A redesign may help with some of those concerns.
I see any other amenities. Are these the sum and total of the amenities that are at this point in stage associated with this application? In other words, are there any? Is it like a pool or any?
They haven't proposed any additional recreation amenities at this point.
Okay. Well, and another thing about the structures, I looked at the planning board's recommendations that I think it was on page 34, and that's of our PDF file that we have here, that the planning board indicated, and I think you've spoken to directly earlier, that structures need to be similar to houses in the neighborhood. And I guess that goes back to the elevations. Elevations are generally requested, are they not, as opposed to photos?
Generally, we do get elevations for conditional zonings. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule that you can't use photos, but we generally receive elevations. Yes.
Well, and I guess the reason I asked that, I see some other notations looking through this. Relative, I think it was page 32, again, of our PDF, talking, I think this was either our staff or it was the planning board, and it was a notation in here that says, with limited building elevations, and they parenthesize the photos submitted, it's unclear to proposed design if it will be compatible with the community. And that is on our page 32. And just for the board, I think the board realizes this, but here again, we're using this term compatible. And in this particular instance, I just want to point out that we're talking about compatibility visual. That's what we're talking. We're not talking the legal term of it being compatible, where that by law is based on use of the land. But here, I think we're talking about the aesthetics.
It is visual primarily, it is visual primarily. That's correct. I'll note that I think when you have multifamily adjacent to single family, those in fact are different land uses. So you probably can engage in a discussion of compatibility. But I'll note this particular tract does not have single family houses adjacent to it. So in that respect, it is more of a visual compatibility, not a land use compatibility.
And again, I would note, if I might, I would note your earlier comment, and the planning board indicated that the structures needed to be similar, and I think you indicated that the backs, it appears from this diagram that we have included in our packet, depicts the rear of some of these residences that will be facing the road that will be utilized to continue on to the development in the back, the Shingles Landing. Is that correct?
It is, and that from a land use perspective, I would say the structures probably should have more of a focal or presence on the street, or if not, they probably need to be screened and just kind of out of view, basically. I just don't know you want the back of multifamily on a single-family street. But there are design things you can do to address that, or the developer can.
Well, Well, that's a good segue into my next question. I don't know, again, whether this is the proper time or if you would be the one that would be the proper person to answer it. But would it behoove us as a board to request that the applicant bring back to us elevations that would be consistent with some of the issues that were spoken to relative to our TRC and as well as the planning board with the questions towards compatibility with the housing facing the rear of the main entrance to the other subdivisions, some of the amenities questions that were asked. Would it enable this board to better be able to make a decision if we knew what we were looking at? Again, this is a conditional rezoning, so we get a chance when we hear a conditional rezoning to make sure that we're getting what is being proposed. So would it behoove the board? Would it be enable us to make a more considered decision?
Certainly within your prerogative to request it, or any member to request additional information.
Well, this is general conversation. I'm discussing this. I'm asking it as an open-ended question to generate discussion from all of us on this.
All right. Anyone have any other questions or comments? All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. First person we have signed up is Roxanne Crocker.
Good evening. My name's Roxanne Crocker, and I live at 134 Applewood Drive in Shingle Landing. I'm going to bring up the small area plan also. I've been to a lot of the meetings for small area, and one of the things that they said over and over again was that we wanted a rural atmosphere. When we bought in Shingle Landing, we were told that it was going to be custom homes. And it was very rural looking. The homes are on almost an acre. Now we're looking at mixed use, which could be anything from rentals to townhomes or condos. We don't even know what we're getting. I understand that density and lot size are different things. However, I do know that 16 units on 4 acres does not look rural. I know that. We're still dealing with the developer as far as getting our railroad crossing taken over so that DOT can take over our roads. We've been waiting on that for a long time. And now you're considering another development in our development, which I'm sure is going to put this on the back burner once again. So I would ask you to please find out what's going on with that before you approve more development on our roads. Also, in relation to how they look, I was really pleased that they asked aesthetically for them to look like our homes, which that's helpful. But the pictures that were shown, they look like they're on a slab. And none of our homes, well, I should say there is an exception. One home is on a slab. But when we bought, we were not supposed to be on slabs. Everything was supposed to be built up. We have no idea what the price is. And we really, if there's going to be something there, please make it an ownership thing. We all know that when things are rented, people don't take care of them the way they do when they own their own homes. So we would ask that you would please make sure that this would be something that would be sold and not rented. And then in closing, I just wanted to talk about incompatibility. And it says in the small area plan that incompatibilities arise when nearby uses differ significantly in terms of intensity, bulk, and or scale. I think this is definitely different than anything we have in the back of our neighborhood. Definitely a different scale, definitely a different bulk. Maybe those aren't the terms, maybe that wasn't the definition of those terms when they put that together, but that's the way I see it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Mel Hopkins.
I'm Mel Hopkins. I live at 204 Walden Drive in York County, Virginia. Mainly I come to these meetings to provide answers from an engineering perspective, but I thought that with Mr. Griggs' concerns, that I would at least address his concerns and maybe any other concerns you might have that mostly, for the most part, engineering related. But it was funny because on my way in, I came down Tulls Creek Road and was driving through some neighborhoods that I'm working for Mr. Old right now on trying to get some roads turned over to the state. And as I was driving through the road, I was driving slow, taking my time, looking at the ditches and looking at just the way the properties were shaped and making sure everything was in compliance with NCDOT. And the entire both neighborhoods that I went through, there's a lot of young children in the neighborhoods. And the funny thing was that I noticed, which is a little different from where I live, and this is actually a positive for the area, is that there were a lot of children at the street. Now, they were in the street, in their driveways, and they were crossing the street with dogs and balls. And I mean, there might have only been 20 kids, but they weren't all in the road. But you had to be very careful driving down the road, with houses on both sides of the street, kids crossing the street and just having fun and playing. The whole idea with having that open space is where it's located is to have a focal point, to have a place where people go to and stay. And admittedly, it's a good point. I mean, you could have situations where a ball rolls out in the road or something like that, but that could happen anywhere. So we could do things like add landscaping to that area to help with that. But just to let you know, it's supposed to be a focal point where people come and stay. That's where they play, or that's where they go to relax. When I talked to Mr. Old about our target folks to live in that area, it wasn't just small families, but it was maybe a young fireman, a young police officer, a young teacher. So that was part of the target group too. And the layout, the way we have the way the homes that are laid out, the road, it's actually done on purpose for appearance, so that you can't see all that pavement, so that it's internal, as opposed to looking like your traditional, town home where it just looks like apartment complex lined up. I'll entertain any questions if anybody has any.
Anyone have any questions?
I would only ask, is there any indication whether these will be townhouses, condos? Are they going to be rentals? I just don't know, and I was wondering,
Probably shouldn't
how it
speak to
came
that,
up.
but Mr. Old can.
No, I don't know. I mean, we're just experimenting, so to speak. We're looking at this as if there's going to be multifamily built in Moyock, this seems like to be a particularly good spot by the assisted living, small enough to find out what multifamily would do in Moyock. And all those questions, even as to the building design, as I told Donna Sue at the planning, I mean, y'all show us what you want. If I was allowed today to go build 16 units in Moyock, I wouldn't do it. I would start with one and see what happens. But right now, it's all ideas and research.
Mr. Old, you didn't sign in, so could you give your name and address for the record, please?
Gary Old, 1669 Tulsa Creek Road, Moyock, NC.
Thank you.
I mean, there's no hurry. It's just research and review would be my answer. But I do know there is a need, and I'm requested at all. Do I have something to rent? And no, it's very hard to find something to rent in Moyock. So I would say, you probably want to, but if to have rental. But if the county feels like, well, we don't want to do that, it needs to be saleable units, and certainly we'll look at it. And if that fits in the plan, we would do it. And if it didn't, we wouldn't. It's just, are we going to have multifamily in Moyock? And if so, what is it going to look like?
The first one was approved in 2006. It has yet to be built.
I understand.
It was approved, and it is sitting there.
There's some very big ones that have been approved and gone
Yes.
away.
Right.
But it boils back to the question is, do we want multifamily in Moyock?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? With that, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask the board for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to deny PB 14-20 due to its inconsistency with the Moyock Small Area Plan because the proposed density is not appropriate for the location since it is at the entrance to a larger lot subdivision, and that the request is not reasonable and not in the public interest because the conceptual design is not consistent with the surrounding development pattern. That's my motion.
I have a motion for denial.
Second that motion.
I have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and I don't know if this is appropriate time, but Ms. Crocker addressed the railroad, Mr. Woody, on Shingle Landing and the roads being taken over by DOT. Where are we with that? Can you get me an update on that?
I'd probably need to bring you back a more detailed update at a later date. Last I heard was that there were 2 railroad entities that had to sign off on the ability for the state to assume maintenance of that crossing, and I know one of those had, but they were still waiting on the other to give some sort of permission. And that's the last I heard, and that's been some time ago, so that may not be the most recent information.
That's been a year ago.
I would like...
It hasn't been quite a year ago. I talked to David Hennett with DOT probably 4 or 5 months ago.
Okay.
I'd like to go ahead and schedule something maybe with you and Mr. McCree to follow up on that.
Okay.
If you would, please.
That it?
Yes, thank you.
All right, new business, deed of easement for through the fence operation by Brady Landing Maple. Mr. McCree.
Mr. Chairman, this is something that the board has experienced in the past. When Brady Landing Air Park residential subdivision was approved and created on Maple Road, the concept was that property owners buying within that air park would have the ability to build hangars on their property and to house or base airplanes on their residential lots. There was an agreement at that time that allowed for those property owners to be able to come through a fence bordering their property and the county's airport property, cross an apron area and access the county's runway via that apron. Since that time, FAA no longer looks favorably upon these types of developments, particularly with regard to potential security risk. And although the county had an easement in place at the time, the FAA now wants to see additional conditions placed on what are known as through-the-fence operations. What is proposed here for you tonight is a new deed of easement. In fact, it is my opinion that the former easement expired under certain terms and conditions that were placed in the easement at the time. But this current deed of easement will replace that one. It will be, rather than an easement between the county and the original developer, Mr. Brady, Brady Landing Air Park will be between the county and Brady Landing Air Park Property Owners Association for the benefit of those persons who own property within that subdivision. The particular items that are of concern to the FAA, and this has been approved by FAA and signed off by that agency, is first of all the length of term for the easement. This particular easement is proposed for a 20-year initial term with the ability, upon a mutual consent by the county and the Air Park Property Owners Association, to extend that for an additional 10 years. So a total maximum of possibly 30 years that the easement might be effective. It also provides for the Property Owners Association to be responsible for the repair and maintenance and upkeep of the gate in the county's fence, as well as the apron area from that gate to the county's airport. That's something the FAA wants to see. It also provides and requires for a payment by property owners who base airplanes in the air park to pay a fee equivalent to that of persons who base their airplanes at the county's airport in a tie-down I believe that's currently $10 or $20 per month. So each person, again, that has an airplane based in Brady Airpark will be billed and required to pay that fee. And then, and importantly, a term that the deed of easement would be canceled and terminated should there be any inconsistency now or in the future between the deed of easement and any of the county's FAA grant terms and conditions. Obviously, the county would not, and the FAA does not intend for the county to lose its status as a public funded airport and the monies that have been put into the airport by the FAA and federal government over the last number of years. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions of the board, and it's commended to you for your approval.
Anyone have questions of Mr. McCree?
One. Mr. McCree, during the time that I was on the Airport Advisory Board, the usage of the fence and the maintenance was the burden of the airport, I believe. Is that something that is part of their HOA, or with the deed for this easement? Is that the operations of the gate and the maintenance?
Well, there's supposed to have been. I understood that the understanding from the very beginning was that the repair and maintenance for the gate was to be the responsibility of the airpark residents. In any event, this deed of easement makes it clear that indeed it is their responsibility. And so for example, if it's struck by lightning, as has occurred in the past, they would be required to pay whatever the repair costs are on the electronics and the mechanism of the fence to repair that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Staff is recommending approval of this?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Hearing nothing else, we need a motion.
And if I may ask that to make it easier for execution, that the county manager be authorized to execute it on behalf of the county.
I'll make that motion to approve the acceptance of the deed of easement through the fence operations by Brady Landing and Maple.
Authorizing the county manager.
Authorizing the county manager
to execute.
Have
a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next item, resolution authorizing upset bid process garage workshop located at 167 Maple Road, Maple.
Also along the airport, the county owns a lot and house that also has a wood shop structure at 167 Maple Road. The county has in the past sought to dispose of the wood shop and have received an offer in the past for its removal from the property. Unfortunately, it's my understanding that at the time the cost was prohibitive to actually move the structure down Maple Road because of the cost to raise or lower power lines and allow for that structure to be moved from the county's property. The county has now received an offer from an adjacent property owner to move it to her lot. Her offer is $1,000 for that particular wood shop structure. The county may, under different means in the general statutes, dispose of personal property in several different ways. What the county would propose, or staff would propose, if you are willing to accept this offer or this bid of $1,000 for the structure, would be to do an upset bid process, whereby if you adopt this resolution, there would be a notice published in the newspaper, and after a period of 10 days, if no upset bids are received, then the county would accept Ms. Frazier's offer of $1,000 and convey ownership of this structure to her. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Is this the picture of it?
Yes.
In our agenda?
There's a picture of it in your agenda package. It's described as a two-story wooden garage workshop with approximately 1,440 square feet of space.
She's going to pay to move it.
Yes, it would be her responsibility and her cost to move the structure off the county's property.
And what happens is now it would go out to public for upset bids.
That's correct. And we publish that notice will be published in the newspaper, given a period of 10 days for upset bids to be received by the clerk to the Board of Commissioners.
All right. Anyone have any questions?
We have no
comments?
liability on her taking the full responsibility of moving that.
No, we will make sure in the bill of sale that she will be accepting all liability and responsibility for removal of the structure from the county's property to hers. Yes, exactly.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to authorize the upset bid process garage workshop located at 167 Maple Road in Maple.
Have a motion for approval.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next item is airports block grant fuel system improvements and upgrades. I believe we have Mr. Bishop here.
Good evening. Hope y'all are doing well, Board of Commissioners. I think I have a presentation to queue up. Here we go. We're talking about a fuel farm upgrade and improvement project at our airport. I did put a little bit of a presentation together to help you out with it, give you a little bit more information. Just a review of some of the steps for both the residents and the public as well as y'all. But we've done some reconfiguration administratively at the airport. We have brought in a new director of business operations and airport operations. Russ Haddad has been there a little over a month now. He's doing a fantastic job. Very happy with that position. We do have a big construction project coming up, which I will probably be before you again in the coming months, as well as the county engineer. We're doing a southern taxiway project. Mr. McCree mentioned federal funds that are available and state funds that are available that the airport has a responsibility to take and receive and improve our airfield. That is one of the major projects we've been planning for, probably around 10 years now to get that project done. So we're looking forward to that coming in the summer, and that's going to have some impacts on traffic patterns on the transfer station as well. We will be closing a portion of Airport Road and converting that roadbed into a new taxiway. So a lot of changes coming there in the next year, so stay tuned for that. To the project at hand, I've heard before that government isn't necessarily a business, but we don't always look at it that way from a staff perspective. The business model, so to speak, for the airport and KONX are the call letters in aviation speak for this airport. We want to have a first-class, customer service focused general aviation and business airport. Safe travel and flying enjoyment are the goals for the people who are using that airport. We need to recognize that this airport is like another welcome center. That terminal building and that field are sometimes the first impression that visitors have to Currituck County, both business and tourist travels. Of course, we make our bread at that airport through three means mostly, through leasing hangar facilities and the based aircraft that are out there, the tax revenue that's generated, of course, selling fuel to those tenants and to the planes that are coming in, and then finally through business concession agreements that we do with certain tenants. Directly to the fuel sales, we've been actually very successful with our Jet A fuel sales, which service turboprop and larger aircraft, some of the executive jets that you've seen out at the airport and that we continue to get. We actually had a Citation 4, I think, last week, and that's almost a 20-passenger airplane. So you can fit a very impressive, very expensive, nice jet into this airport, and we see more and more of those. Our fuel sales reflect that. We've seen great increases in our Jet A fuels. We've actually seen decreases in our avgas sales, and those are your more hobby pilots. Our base tenants are mostly avgas purchasers. So we've seen an increase in jet fuel sales, but a decrease in some of our avgas sales. And I think our fuel farm may partially be a culprit for this, and I'll show you some pictures in a second that'll give you the condition. But it's basically old. It's got outdated pumps. I believe when the pumps were installed years ago, they were bought used. It looks like the old S.A. Walker fueling station before it was all torn down a few years ago. So it's not the best appearance outwardly, and it's had a few operational quirks that our guys have gotten pretty used to working with. We're looking to clean all that up, fix it all up now. Certainly a deterrent from refueling when you see these pictures could be seen. We're using grant funds to fund most of this project. It's about a $36,000 project. 90% of those are federal funds through a non-primary entitlement program called the Vision 100 Grant Program. You'll see right here some of these pictures, the rust that's all over the pump right there, some of the corroding lines. Where those bolts are, that used to be a grounding strap. You always have to ground airplanes from static electricity when you go to fill them. You don't want to create any spark. We're missing a grounding strap. That has since been replaced, by the way. We pre-ordered one of those grounding straps as a safety concern and have replaced it. You see some aging hoses there and, of course, some corrosion on the pump fixtures there. So overall, not a very pleasing visual experience. And even operationally, it's had some quirks with us. So we're looking to replace all those pumps. So that's a Jet A pump, an avgas pump, and a MoGas pump. We have 3 different pumps out there. We're going to replace all the hoses. We've already done one of the grounding straps. We're going to replace the other one as well. We're also going to install a single point fuel operation from our jet tank. Right now, we're filling a fuel truck that the county operates and fills jets with to get up real close to the wing. Right now, we're filling it through the regular pump, and that's only giving us so many gallons per minute. We're going to install up to 1,000 gallon per minute single point direct into that truck so we can refill it much quicker, take less time, and be safer operation. And we're looking at, I just confirmed this with the contractor, OESCO, that was selected from 5 different folks that we sent bids out to. They can be started as soon as next Monday on the 13th. They only expect about 2 weeks to get this accomplished, so we should have a minimal impact to our tenant operations, other refueling operations at the field. You'll see right there, we have a balance right now of $460,000 in those FAA grants, those Vision 100 grants. So we're only using about $3,000, maybe a little more than $3,000 from general fund, regular county dollars. The rest we're leveraging federally, and we're going to use additional federal funds on the taxiway that we see coming forward, and those funds we're able to use for additional airport improvement projects, again, to improve that flying experience for the customer and our tenants. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Good job, but with the new addition to Mr. Haddad, we've
Yes.
been talking about for 3 years adding hangars. Do
Yes,
we
sir.
have a waiting list? First of all, do we still have a waiting list?
We do still have a waiting list. Yes, sir.
Roughly how many are on there?
I believe there's 13 people on that waiting list currently.
Do we have any plans in the near future to accommodate some of those 13 people by adding hangars?
Between Russ and myself, yes, we do. Our next major capital project that we will be proposing to the board, to the county manager as well, is to develop additional ramp space on it would be the north side of our C hangar building. We need some more pavement in order to get to another building. And of course, we need to double check that demand's as strong as we have seen it before. Typically what happens when we talk about building another hangar building is we'll call all the people on our waiting list and they'll push us off or say they're not ready yet. So that demand, while it appears strong, will sometimes dwindle down when you start asking for the check to be written. So we need to better tie down where that demand is, but our next projects moving north from the C hangar will be putting in more tie down space, because when we do this southern taxiway improvement, we're going to lose 4 temporary tie down spaces that folks are currently, that Citation 4 I just mentioned was parked in that area earlier this week. So we're going to need to replicate that pavement somewhere else. And pavement, of course, has to be built to a certain strength level, so it's not necessarily a cheap proposition. And the last C hangar unit that you built was a little more than $1 million, if I remember correctly. So building more demand and meeting that demand is an expensive proposition for the county taxpayer. I think we're doing a good job of getting the best out of it and making money at this business operation. But that'll be a consideration that we're planning to put before the board as we formulate a 2-year budget going forward.
But if the demand is there, we could build it and it will pay for itself over time.
Over time, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Sounds like you need to get your grant ink pen out again.
Yeah.
Well, we're certainly good at requesting funds. The Division of Aviation has been a great sponsor with FAA. We worked with them on the through the fence agreement. We're working with them on the taxiway and, of course, on this project. They feel confident in the plan that we've set forth for the airport and its future development, as do I. And certainly Russ is part of that planning team as we go forward and propose. We're cleaning up a lot of the stuff that needed to be done at the airport, and we're going to be looking to move forward and make it even better and brighter.
Mr. Bishop, I just want to add, along with this fuel upgrades of the system, Mr. Haddad, I had an opportunity to sit down with him about 2 weeks ago and
Yes.
talked to him, I guess, before lunch, and by 5 o'clock that afternoon, he had sent me his 90-day plan of action.
That's right.
And with the fuel replacement, that was one of the items, and we did address some of the hangar things. So
Correct.
he's working very closely with the interim manager, Mr. Lambertson, to really, come up with the projects and get a game plan. So I just want to offer
Yes.
some kudos to that.
he's been doing a great job. The 90-day plan is fantastic. We're actually meeting with our marketing firm tomorrow to talk about ways that we're going to continue marketing the airport, again, to increase those fuel sales, the revenues that we can generate. There's a couple other projects that I didn't mention here. We're building a new welcome sign, again, for that appearance for the folks that are coming to us for the first time. We've replaced several of the fire extinguishers throughout the property. There's a whole, it's almost a honey-do list that we've got to do out there. There's constant maintenance that's required at that facility. And Russ, and I can't do any of this without mentioning Roger, of course, the interim director that's been with us a while, and our staff out there, all of our lineman guys have been out there for a long time, very well experienced, and they're doing a great job. I will ask you to keep Mr. Lambertson and his wife in your thoughts. They've had some health issues recently, so unfortunately he hasn't been able to spend as much time as we would have liked with Russ, but certainly keep Joyce and Roger in your thoughts and prayers.
And one more thing that I want you to address for the public on the fueling.
Yes.
We've had naval operations with the helicopters lately, and that's been a hot topic, and my phone has been ringing off the hook. But they are not just landing, but they are purchasing fuel, correct?
They don't always purchase fuel. I cannot say that for a fact. Sometimes they do operations and they leave typically as a courtesy. They will purchase fuel. We like it when they purchase fuel, obviously. We had a helicopter training event last summer that brought 4 Blackhawks in, and all of them filled up 1,000 gallons. So they do pay us back in those fuel purchases at different times, but they don't always guarantee that they will purchase fuel. What we try to do with military operations, of course, we're a public use airport. It's open airspace, so it's intended for folks to use that field. It was originally designed and built as a Navy field back in the 40s for World War II. I believe there was a right built into that when it was transferred to the state and then to the county that allows the military to continue using that field. They've done a much better job, when I say they, Department of Defense generally, it's usually the Navy, of coordinating their training events with Russ, with myself. They don't always make that call. We don't always get all the information we'd like, so we could, allay some of the concerns of the nearby residents. But it is indeed an airport, and there is going to be aviation activity there. We always want folks to stay in the pattern. We've got posted rules on how to fly in and fly out of the airport to help mitigate those impacts. And of course, we did the small area plan and the airport overlay district to also try to minimize those impacts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Second. I will say one thing, Peter, before we vote on this.
Yes, sir.
When Secretary of Commerce Sharon Decker was out there, she was just really impressed with the whole facility out there in relation to things happening economically out there. And I've looked at these pumps, and I've had pilots call me and say they won't purchase fuel because of the pumps. And so it's well overdue, and appreciate your hard work on it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is appointments. I think, Mr. Griggs, you have a Whalehead Trust appointment.
Yes, could I have that continued, please?
Certainly. And I think the next appointment, Library and Tourism, are Commissioner Beaumont's.
It's Commissioner Beaumont's, and he actually has submitted his request or his recommendation to those, if y'all are so inclined to take them up tonight, or if you want to wait till when he comes.
If he's ready to submit them, we'll do them.
He submitted a Keith Dix for the library and a Daniel Pennington for the Tourism Advisory Board.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Consent agenda.
Motion for approval.
Have a motion for approval.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Commissioners report, Mr. Griggs.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Mr. Martin.
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Petrie. Ms. Gilbert, keep it rolling.
Well, I've always got to add something. I've been asked to announce that this Saturday, the 11th, sorry guys, Bark in the Park is being sponsored with AOL at Currituck Barbecue from 11 until 2. So come out and join them in their Bark in the Park. Also, there's some needs at the Currituck's SPCA. They need kitty litter, kitty bowls, Stainless steel is preferred, and the pellets. They've got food, but they do need some kitten supplies.
Is that it? I have nothing. Mr. Scanlon,
Nothing tonight, thank you.
need a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed?